I will now leave the floor to Giovanni Zangrandi, who is the farmer who is growing under an agrivoltaic system in the province of Piacenza. My name is Zangrandi, I come from Monticelli. It's been 7 years since I've started farming in fields with the agrivoltaic system. I work with the agro part of the system. I am a farmer. We have 2 plants, which one is about 20 acres and the other is 9 acres. The first plant is on a field rich of clay, while the second plant is on a more sandy soil. So that meant that we had to carry out different operations on the 2 plants. So in the first plant, with a more solid ground, we needed to have a draining system to carry away the water, because otherwise, with the pores, the water would have collected underneath them and it would have stayed there. While with the second plant, this wasn't needed. In the first plant, it was also possible to build an irrigation plant, or more specifically, a sub-irrigation system, which is compatible with the kind of soil we have there. Otherwise, we would have had to grow the crops which need a more dry land, or otherwise have another kind of irrigation system which had to be changed every year. So that's why we built a sub-irrigation system, which means building an irrigation system in the ground, and once it's set, it should last for some times. We have had some problems because having that kind of irrigation systems means being careful while working the land. You don't have to damage them. But then we have had moles. We found holes in the fields, and that gave us some problems. Now we see how it will work this year. In this first plant, we managed to carry out our farming in the same way as we did before. We even added one, which is rice. It's not an easy plant to grow. You know how much water is needed to grow rice, and it's quite difficult to produce. And I have to say that we've had good results, because we have a yield which is higher than the national average, and at the same time we've had even a better quality in rice compared to the national average. In fact, we've had such good results that our rice could be used as baby food. The analyses were carried out by this university. As you can see, we had 0.030 of arsenic, and with cadmium we have 0.005. As you can see, the national average is higher than our results, and this was really satisfying result for us. I think that In this case, for the cultivation of those fields, there is still some things to be done to improve, because we have poles, we have tensors, and this presents some difficulties. If you are a farmer, you know what it means to have a pole in your field. And in that case, we have many poles. We have one pole each 12 meters. But they're in a row, so it's not that hard. And then you have the tensors. So that means that there are some areas around the poles that are not cultivated. It's about 20%. Maybe it would be more interesting to have some fruit trees in those kind of fields, or maybe to have livestock. Now we can find more solutions with our fantasy, and that depends on the situation, on how much you want to work. But that means that there are many possibilities, such as livestock. This is the irrigation system, the sub-irrigation system. You have all the benefits of sub-irrigation: no dispersion, no evaporation, homogeneous irrigation, water and energy saving. But before I say something definite on agrivoltaic, I would need some more years, because I would like to see everything that can happen in that situation. For example, when we had the mold problem, it was quite unexpected, so you never know what can happen. Then on the poles and on the plant itself, I think it would be quite durable. I know that some plants work for over 20 years. But then irrigation was quite a simple problem to solve. And since I had already some solar panels on my roof, I used that energy to power our sub-irrigation system, and that was basically free of cost. Having a pump and a photovoltaic system, I could irrigate my whole field. Of course, that means depending on where the water comes from. I have it quite nearby. Then yield production. I've already said that rice did quite well. Then we've had wheat, rapeseed, and peas. Those are our main products. They don't need much irrigation. Then we now have maize, soy. The year I did the sub-irrigation system, we sowed the soybeans on the same day, on the 20th of June. And so we sowed on the 20th of June. And in 10 days, all our soy plants blossomed thanks to that irrigation system. Here we have the thresher, but that is rice. But then in the other clip you can see the thresher harvesting soy. It took about, we harvested about 40 tons per hectare. Then in the second plant of Castelvetro, that is quite a sandy soil, it's quite hard to irrigate. You need another irrigation system, and then there we change our culture each year. We've had corn for 1 year, and we've had quite a good harvest. So now I'm saying some obvious things, but if you have any more specific questions, I'm open for answering you.
Una domanda, mi sembra di capire che le macchine sono quelle standard.
I have a question.
Che utilizzano nella coltivazione.
As I understand, you're using standard machinery. Do you have some specific needs that you need as far as machinery goes? Is there any modification that you would like to see on your machineries? Talking about machinery, for sowing we have a 530 machine, so it needs us only about 2 rounds to sow everything. Then for corn we have 60-meter machinery, and for the cultivation you already know them. As you know, we use the same machinery we usually use for wheat. Usually it's always better to don't go too much over the field with the machineries. But for now, we are waiting to say our final word on this system, because we would like to have a longer experience to see how the soil reacts to this kind of new work done on it. It's been 5 years since we began, and for now it seems feasible.
Un'altra questione importante penso sia quella del diserbo.
Another important question is weeding. In the areas underneath the pores, are there any specific problems of weeding? No, it's quite easy to manage, because we have a 10 meters bar to get underneath the system, and so it is possible to weed even between the pores. Now we will watch a short clip shot on the field in Monticelli.
sono altre domande?
Any more questions?
Aggiungo che ci vogliono
I would like
imprenditori
to
agricoli
add that we need
che hanno questo
farmers
tipo di approccio, di
with
innovazione, di
such an innovative spirit who take risks.
come Giovanni Zangrandi.
It wasn't easy to find a farmer such as Giovanni Zangrandi.
Adesso diamo la
Now I will leave the floor to
direttore di Coldiretti di Piacenza.
the director of Coldiretti of Piacenza.
Delle energie rinnovabili in agricoltura.
We talk about renewable energy in agriculture, Mr. Cremonesi.
Grazie mille, buongiorno.
Thank you very much.
Volevo giusto fare un paio di battute su cosa è stato.
I would like to say just a few words on what was renewable energy for agriculture in the recent past, because it began as an opportunity and then it became a system that changed deeply how farming is done. Renewable energy is not just photovoltaics, but it was mainly biogas. I remember that time because I was working in a really hot area for biogas, which is the province of Cremona. And we've had some problems there because around 2008, 2013, we've had some subsidies, which was a tariff on with 8 cents per kilowatt with plants under 1,000 kilowatt. And at the time, many plants were created with an installed capacity of 999 kilowatt. Only in Emilia-Romagna at that time, more than 300 plants were created. And Emilia-Romagna was the third province for installed capacity. The second one is Veneto, while in Lombardia we had more than 300 plants at the same time. The average capacity for those plants in Emilia-Romagna was about 750 kilowatt. But that average doesn't tell us how many of those plants are of more than 900 kilowatt and how many others are really small. Those small plants were often created to solve the problem of wastewaters. Those plants meant that about 20% of crop growth was used for biogas. That means that we've had less food for livestock. That means we've had less food for livestock, and livestock is one of the main industry in our region for dairies, for example. The Pianura Padana region is the biggest region for dairy production in Italy, and those changes gave us some real problems. Here is the president of Coldiretti, and I bet he knows what kind of problem that was, because we have some problems with food for livestock, and then this kind of bubble brought us a problem with the price of renting land. So some years before that, we've had other competitors for land renting, such as some years before that was swine farmers.
molto più alta rispetto
because those people had
all'agricoltore tradizionale.
more capacity for paying
Ripeto, quando,
land.
Questa io la definisco moda.
Then, when that trend on biogas ended,
allora a quel punto abbiamo ricominciato a vedere nascere
we've seen that
degli impianti che oggi hanno
some
la loro funzionalità,
better plants
non
started,
solo,
plants
di
who were functional and profitable,
sostegno, di integrazione, di multifunzionalità dell'azienda
plants
agricola,
that help,
ma anche un riutilizzo
that work together with farms and which can utilize a sub-product of farming, which is dark waters, which have always been a resource to farming.
Ci si è messa anche la tematica della direttiva nitrati, una direttiva nitrati che andrebbe riscritta, una
but that became a problem because of some laws on dark waters, and biogas plants then became the solution for the problem of dark waters.
Una battuta sul tema del fotovoltaico.
Now on photovoltaics.
Ma anche su questo tema la partita non è
Here we're talking about photovoltaics, but that isn't something that easy for agriculture, because until 2011 we've seen land grabbing of agricultural land to use for solar plants. Then, luckily, after 2011, we've had a law stopping land grabbing.
Il degrado naturale degli incentivi.
And then, as the subsidies were reduced, this trend stopped eventually. Now we know that in every region that all the local associations are trying to promote laws to save soil, and then sometimes people go back to talking about solar plants on the ground. You know how I think about that, and I think solar plants have already done enough damage, and that soil under solar panels usually cannot be used for farming anymore. I don't have much time, but I would like to hear about the economic part of agrivoltaic, because our association called Diretti has the aim of defending food production both for consumers but also for farmers. So I would like to hear about the economic part, to see a business plan, to see whether it's a system that can be applied to the cultures of our territory, such as tomatoes, for example. I'm really curious to hear about that. If I were a researcher here in Piacenza, I would surely want to carry out a study on tomatoes.
Tecnologia di questo tipo. Certo dico, sappiamo che abbiamo ancora.
Of course, we know that there are still many roofs that could be used for photovoltaics.
E su questa cosa io
and
lancio una battuta e non vi voglio rubare altro tempo.
I would just say my last word. Between July and August in Italy, you know that if you leave your car in a parking lot, it becomes scorching hot when you come back. So why don't you use this kind of system to cover the parking lots? And that will have a smaller impact than using them on agricultural soil. Thank you.
Ci sono domande?
Any questions?
Ok. Adesso entriamo un po' più nello specifico.
Now we will look more in detail
Agrovoltaico.
agrivoltaics.
dicevo, l'espressione
As I
italiana
said,
agrofotovoltaico.
it's the Italian version of agrophotovoltaics, as it is called more scientifically.
Allora sì, mi chiedeva appunto il
Mr.
Zangrandi,
Zangrandi
condition se il
asked me if we should leave the floor to the president of Confagricoltura,
un saluto.
Mr. Gasparini.
Vi ringrazio.
Thank you.
Intanto sì, vi saluto e faccio complimenti.
I want to greet you all
Bellissimi,
and
molto coinvolgenti.
thank you for this conference. It's a really interesting subject. I would have a lot to say on what Mr. Zangrandi just said, but I will try to be brief. We've talked about agriculture, but then we have a country with a really poor organization. As we've heard about the policies on biogas, we've had a phenomenon where a lot of plants were built and they were not suited for our country. And that is the result of bad policies. And maybe that is also our fault. It wasn't really a problem of having enough supply. It was a problem of soil usage. Then we talked about using less resources, both for agriculture and energy production. We could implement a lot of technologies to increment the effectiveness. And that also regards to water. We're now having a really poor managing of water. I don't really understand how we can have a good economy when the government is carrying out really bad politics on many fronts. What should we do? We should better manage the supply and also better manage soil consumption. I don't like to talk about sustainability. I like to talk about a reasonable way of doing things. You have to be reasonable and logical. For biogas plants, that means having one plant per one farm and not more. This technology is now heading in the right way because we're trying to have energy and agriculture and then to be compatible. I think that soil consumption is a crime, and I'm really careful in that respect. So this is a really good idea. Of course, we should put solar panels on roofing, on parking lots, but also agrivoltaics is a good idea. Maybe with tomatoes it wouldn't really work, as picking would be impossible, but still it's a really good idea, and I want to thank the inventors. But then, as I said before, we need to better manage agriculture in our country. We should have balance, we should have reasonability, we should have soil saving, we should have water, we should have those means that make a country civil, because we're now acting as an uncivil country. Here in Piacenza, soon they will close our main river and main source of water. That means that farmers will have it really hard. And this is the real drama, to have balance and science. Sadly, people in universities are not as important as politicians or as bureaucrats. This is the real problem of our country. So we should find balance and we should implement technologies.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie per il suo intervento. Adesso passiamo, come dicevo, più all'aspetto
Now we will
tecnologico e anche poi economico
look more in detail at the
dell'agrivoltaico.
technological and economic
L'ingegnere
aspect
Zanera,
of the agrivoltaic plant.
la produzione di
I will leave the
energia
floor
per
to
l'autoconsumo.
Mrs. Vanera, who will talk about how to increase energy production for self-consumption. Thank you. I would like to start by giving a definition of self-consumption. Self-consumption is the energy consumed by a household who also produces energy, so without connecting to the grid to use energy. As you can see, in red we have energy production and in blue we have energy consumption. The percentage of self-consumed energy depends on the consumption of the household and on the functioning of the photovoltaic plant. By maximizing self-consumption is savings on utility. Usually, on average, we pay energy 8 to 18 to 25 cents, but energy production is about 4 to 5 cents, so 4 to 8 cents. So, as you can see, it is really convenient for the user to self-produce and self-consume energy. That is the benefit that allows to install a bigger capacity, and so the investment is sensible and it will bring profit to the household. In Italy, we have a convention with the national grid which pays back part of the energy that a user has to buy from the grid, and that allows us to have a shorter road from the energy produced on the plant to the household. There are three possible ways of consuming it. It can be self-consumed, it can be stored in batteries, or it can be sold to the grid. For a farm, it is very likely that the plant would still need more energy from the grid. For a farm, that means that they could produce energy and also buy energy from the grid without any expenses. For farming in Italy, you have the chance to get paid for the excess energy that you put on the grid. In farming, self-consumption can be used for heating, cooling, conditioning, or machinery. In particular, it's really interesting to self-consume energy in hothouses, in dairy farms, and to produce food products. It is also really interesting to have agrivoltaic solar systems installed over parking lots. Today we are talking more about agriculture, so we didn't think much of that aspect, but it's a really versatile system that can be used in many settings. Greenhouses are really interesting for us because they require a lot of energy to set the internal climate
diciamo che il nostro sistema
And our system
si distingue
is
dall'immagine di serra fotovoltaica
different from the more traditional greenhouses with solar panels on the roofing,
perché prima di tutto
because first of all
è un sistema sopraelevato,
it is
quindi non è
a system which is elevated, so it doesn't contact with the greenhouse, and then it allows to regulate the shading so that we can
permettere alla luce di arrivare alle
have
culture e a seconda
more
delle
sunlight,
culture e del momento
and depending on the
dell'anno in cui
needs
si
of the
trovano,
plants and on the time of the year, we can
agricola piuttosto della produzione elettrica.
have more sunlight hitting the greenhouse, or we can produce more energy. The best possible result is to have a balance between energy production and agricultural production. Here we have economic balance. Let's say that we have a greenhouse gases with a need of 155,000 kilowatt hour per year. All that energy could be produced by one agrivoltaic system. Then if we have a 60% of energy self-consumed and 40% bought from the grid, you can pay back the investment in about 6 years. Another good example of agrivoltaic technology being used is with hangers, because you can integrate the solar system with the hanger, and that means that you save both money and space, because you can use a single structure for both the solar system and the hanger. This is particularly good for farms which need hangers, otherwise you can just create the solar system near the farm. Now let's move on to new perspectives. We foresee that we will need more electric energy to power transport and machinery. So agrivoltaic can satisfy all the needs because it's a high profit technology. And that is all. Thank you.
Grazie Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Ci sono domande?
Are there any questions?
Passo la parola all'ingegnere.
Then I will leave the floor to Mr. Riboldi, our engineer,
Si occupa con noi dall'inizio.
who has been with us from the very beginning of this project. He will talk about optimization of the production on photovoltaics and agrivoltaic plants. Thank you. I will start from a small chart of the kinds of photovoltaic plants that you can find. The first type is the standalone plant. It's a plant where we have a photovoltaic generator, an accumulator, a battery, and an inverter. And this inverter can support both current, continuous current and alternate current. These are usually needed in such objects such as military objects or rural villages where it is harder to connect them with the grids, or monitoring stations such as climate monitoring stations and so on. But then the most common plants are the grid-connected plants, where there are two subtypes. One is the total output, where all the energy is emitted in the electric grid, and those are the plants that were very popular thanks to some policies in 2009 and 2011. And then you have the self-consumption plant, where energy is self-consumed for the household, for industry production, or on a farm. There can be batteries, and anyway there is a part of energy which is self-consumed and another part which is given to the grid. These are plants that are meant for selling the energy on the free market, the first one, and the second one is a plant that is suited for household, for industries, or for farms. Then, this is not the Italian case, because we have a lot of law restricting this, but there should be another kind of plant, which is something in between the two, which is not connected to the national grid, but has a microgrid. So that means that a few users share one single small grid. Then, talking about solar plants, there are solar trackers. They can be mono-axis or dual-axis. These are the system that we build. The mono-axis is a solar plant where panels can rotate on the main axis and they have a small tilt of only 15 degrees, while the dual-axis solar tracker can rotate on the main axis, and then the panels can rotate on their own axis. Why did we choose solar tracking? First of all, to maximize production for soil used. And secondly, because thanks to solar tracking, there are two main advantages. The first is that you can set the solar tracker any which way you want, and so you can respect the agriculture's needs. And the second point is shadowing, and such a system can help you manage the shadowing on the field. The principle of solar tracking is tracking, and it means that the panel is placed in a perpendicular position with respect to the sun to maximize energy production. And then there is another function, which is the function backtracking. What does it mean? It means that in the first and in the last hours of the day, when the sun is really low on the horizon, the panels, if you put the panels perpendicular to the sun, then the first panel will cast a shadow on the others, and so you would lose productivity. And that's why during those hours the panels are not perpendicular, but they are set in a way as to avoid panels shadowing each other. These are the main elements of photovoltaic plants. You have photovoltaic panels, solar trackers, you have wiring, you have panels, electric panels, you have inverters, you have batteries, and you have transformators. Then we can move on to optimization of those plants. Of course, you have to make a distinction between new plants and existing plants. As for new plants, the main part is engineering and developing the system, because we understand that poor project development means that you will lose productivity. So the project is fundamental for having a good functioning.
Per gli impianti nuovi è importante sicuramente
For new plants, it's also important
produzione e l'installazione
to have some checking and inspection and carry out the installation with high qualified personnel.
riguarda due aspetti. Una prima
For
parte
existing
rilevante
plants,
che
there
vuol
are
dire
two
modificare
aspects. The first is
alcuni
revamping,
componenti del sistema
which means modifying some
per
elements
ottimizzare chiaramente la produzione.
to increase production. And the first crucial point is the monitoring system, because you need to have a complete monitoring of the system to understand when there are problems and to intervene on those problems. Then changing broken or ineffective components. And lastly, thanks to the new laws, you can do some modifications on the plant, so you can switch from a fixed plant to a solar tracking plant. Another really important aspect for optimizing production is the optimization of checks and of problem solving. So in the same time, it is important to constantly check on the data from the plant, to create and to have some software that can help you manage and to foresee problems ahead, and also to carry out some corrections on the plant, such as substituting a component before it breaks down. Then, as for data collecting goes, you can find help in drones and thermography. Using drones, you can carry out evaluation of huge surfaces, and as for photovoltaics, the most important analysis is thermography, so you can check which panels are not working, which panels are ineffective. And in agriculture, thermography can also be used to collect data on the crops or on the plant. We also are aware that now use drones for microfertilization to carry out precision farming thanks to drones. Drones also allow you to act quickly and swiftly on existing plants, but also on plants that are being built. So let's go now back to agrivoltaics. All that has been said is true also for agrivoltaics, but another really important part is having a good project for the photovoltaics and for agriculture. We've just heard from our colleagues and from university professors about the studies and the research on agriculture. Now we have a modeling software that we can use to optimize our project of the plant, not just for energy production, but also for the crops that are being cultivated underneath our plant. We have developed a really versatile plant, so it is really easy to have larger arrays of panels or tighter. And that means that you can regulate the shadows that is cast on the ground.
Oltre a questo, diciamo, la nostra
Besides
esperienza
all
ci
of
porta
that, in
anche
our
ad,
experience,
utilizzare delle tecniche
we
sia
have
in
also
fase di
used
installazione sia in fase di manutenzione che ci
some
fanno
particular techniques during the mounting phases that allow us to respect the soil. Here you can see that we are mounting the plant in Monticelli, where for some economic reason, but also to respect the soil, we used an helicopter to carry the materials on the ground. And that allowed the ground to be safeguarded. Then we carry out maintenance work without heavy machinery. Here you can see that we have some ladders, some platforms, and that means that there are no machineries on the fields.
Una particolare, diciamo, chiudo mettendo un focus particolare sui sistemi di accumulo.
Then I would also like to talk about accumulation systems or batteries. They maybe are still not so much cost effective, but still storage systems are something that we see more and more in the future. Storage systems have to be thought about not only on the plant but more in general for the grids. Now there are some projects to build some storage system to safeguard the grid from blackouts. The storage system also favors self-consumption because it means that the energy that we overproduce during the day can be used at night time. It also allows you to sell energy during those hours when energy is more expensive. So here in the chart you can see the energy cost during the day on the energy market, and so it is clear that it's more convenient to sell energy at around at night time. So the plant is more productive in summertime at about noon, but then here energy is actually cheaper, and if you can sell that energy at night time, you can gain about 8% of the value. It is also crucial to be able to sell energy to the grid when it is actually required. In some other European countries, some plants have to be ready to give energy to the grid when they ask for it. That is all. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alessandro. Now I will leave the floor to my friend Ronald Knosch, who is not also the executive director of REM Tec, but he is also the owner of CBM Future, a French firm, and he will talk about agrivoltaics, more in general, agrivoltaics and future perspective for the energy market.
I'm very sorry, but I don't speak Italian.
C'è una traduzione.
So,
Ronald, sì, Ronald parla l'italiano ma ha vergogna a parlare italiano, quindi parla in inglese.
Ronald doesn't speak Italian, so he will speak in English, and we will have a consecutive interpretation.
Sì, cioè prima Ronald farà delle frasi, poi lei traduce.
yes, I speak 15 minutes and then she can translate. No problem. Okay. I keep very sorry not to speak Italian language. I speak many other languages, but unfortunately, when I was young, I never got the chance to learn Italian. So we were starting this morning with Professor Amaducci and Giovanni Zangrandi, two persons who were thinking and explaining some visions in respect of one's photovoltaico and biogas, and then roof and water distribution in the field.
Questa mattina il professor Amaducci e Giovanni Zangrandi ci hanno parlato di visioni per l'uso del fotovoltaico, del biogas, per l'uso dell'acqua e di come utilizzare le superfici dei tetti.
This combined vision shows that in agriculture the revolution is moving on. Okay, so that the revolution is moving on, and this is where we are going. So you see, in 1950 until 2020, starting with the horses and coming to the full electric moved tractor in the fields.
Quella che è in corso adesso è una rivoluzione in agricoltura. Possiamo vedere nel corso di 50 anni che siamo passati dai cavalli ai macchinari elettrici, ai trattori elettrici.
Photovoltaic energy is becoming very, very cheap. I saw in the last couple of days some study where they are predicting production costs of 2 or 2.5 euro cents per kilowatt hour in Germany in the next 10 years.
E il prezzo del fotovoltaico sta scendendo rapidamente. Ho letto di recente uno studio che prevede un prezzo per l'energia da fotovoltaico di circa 2,50 euro per kilowatt.
2 centesimi.
2 centesimi per kilowatt.
This means this is a very, very low price, and this has the chance also for changes in the agriculture, and let me say the energy transition will bring also a large transition in the field of agriculture.
Quindi questi prezzi che saranno sempre più bassi porteranno a un passaggio verso l'energia elettrica che coinvolgerà anche l'agricoltura.
For example, today in France in 2014, the consumption of oil was in agriculture close to 3.8 million tons per year. And based on this, 73% were based on full oil, which can then come over to full electrical power in the future.
Una stima dice che in Francia nel 2014 si sono consumati circa 3,8 tonnellate di petrolio e si stima che in generale di questo consumo il 73% passerà dal petrolio all'energia elettrica.
So this means the world in agriculture will change, and we will come to the point. This is an extract which I took from Accenture related to precision farming. So in the past, let me say, according to the knowledge, to the transmission from generation to generation, agriculture were moving on. In the future, a lot of data will be collected in agriculture in order to automatize the agriculture as much as possible. With a result of, for example, milk production increase of by 18%, more or less, or wheat production by circa 10%, more or less, by using algorithm, data mining and machine learning in the system.
In passato in agricoltura il progresso avveniva col passaggio della conoscenza da una generazione all'altra, mentre in futuro vedremo che in agricoltura saranno sempre più presenti i computer che elaborano dati che verranno raccolti sul posto e questi dati permettono un'agricoltura di precisione con un incremento della produttività, ad esempio un incremento della produzione del latte del 18% e del frumento del 10%, e altri sistemi che verranno coinvolti saranno il cosiddetto data mining, quindi la raccolta dei dati, e il machine learning, quindi l'apprendimento dei computer.
So when I start first with the algorithm for agriculture. So, and this is, let me say, first to collect data about culture and farming, and then to generate this algorithm to see how could be the growth on each part of a parcel of a land in order to improve this production.
Vediamo come gli algoritmi avranno un ruolo nell'agricoltura. In futuro In una coltivazione differenziata si potranno raccogliere vari dati che, elaborati da un algoritmo, potranno suggerire dei miglioramenti per ogni parte della coltivazione.
And let me say, in 20 years or 30 years from now, maybe before, there will be a computer installed in the farm of Giovanni Zangrandi, and then he can manage everything from his seat on what is running on the field.
Tra 20-30 anni il signor Zangrandi potrà gestire i suoi campi stando seduto alla scrivania da un computer.
So, regarding livestock and cattle, let me say there are a lot of movements nowadays in order to develop some measurements on nectar, on to measure the fertility of the cows. So it means that this will improve, as a result, the quantity of milk by circa 15 to 20% more, for an investment of circa 5,000 euro for 5 years, which means 1,000 euro per year for about 100 heads. The gain, the benefit, net benefit is close to 22,000 euro per year.
Poi le innovazioni chiaramente coinvolgeranno anche l'allevamento degli animali. Adesso in Germania ci sono delle tecnologie in sviluppo per misurare il diametro del collo degli animali, per tracciare la fertilità, e questi sviluppi porteranno potenzialmente a un guadagno, a un aumento del 15-20% della produzione di latte, con un investimento di 5.000 euro in 5 anni. Quindi abbiamo un investimento di 1.000 euro l'anno per un guadagno considerevole.
This means the consequence of it is that the telecom expenses in the next 4 or 5 years will be more than doubled as it is today as a result. The telecommunication expenses will more than double in the next 4 or 5 years related to this.
Questo vuol dire che il settore delle telecomunicazioni nei prossimi anni raddoppierà o addirittura aumenterà ancora di più le sue dimensioni.
So, as a result of all of it, there will be more consumption of electric power. On once related to the transition from oil to electricity, and second is to improve by improving farming.
Quindi nei prossimi anni vedremo un aumento del consumo di elettricità per questi due fattori, quindi il passaggio dal petrolio all'energia elettrica e il consumo di tutti quei sistemi come computer e di raccolta dei dati.
So, this is, let me say, the initial idea and the consequence of agrovoltaico. Where can agrovoltaico help? Agrovoltaico is the most efficient power system in the market today, which I know. And I was last week in China, I was the week before in Japan, visiting my 2 friends here. So I don't know any other system which is efficient like this one. So less power cost for self-consumption. I mentioned before, 2 cents euro per kilowatt. This is not for today, this is maybe in 5 or 6 or 7 years, but we will come to that point.
Quindi l'idea di agrovoltaico è partita da una domanda: chi possiamo aiutare? Ora, per quanto ne so io, agrovoltaico è il sistema più efficiente al mondo per la produzione di energia elettrica e agricoltura. Sono stato anche in Cina e in Giappone, non c'è niente di simile. Noi puntiamo a un futuro dove il prezzo per kilowatt sarà di 2 centesimi di euro.
So the result of it is that the farmer is becoming more and more entrepreneur, looking after his costs, much more as maybe it is today.
Quindi noi abbiamo una visione in cui l'agricoltore è sempre di più un imprenditore e si deve occupare anche dei costi.
But as, for example, Giovanni Zangrandi has done it with his pumping system and his rooftop photovoltaic system. And on the other side, there will be an improvement of the efficiency by the power, by the shadow generated by under the modules, by the water savings, and by the optimized distribution of the fertilizer in the field.
Diventeranno più imprenditori, come ha fatto ad esempio il signor Zangrandi con il sistema di irrigazione connesso ai pannelli solari sul tetto. Oltre a ciò il nostro sistema permetterà anche di risparmiare acqua del 20-30% proprio grazie all'ombra che viene gettata sul terreno e grazie all'agricoltura di precisione si risparmierà anche fertilizzante.
So, due to the fact that we have our own drone, due to the fact that we are working here with the university, and thanks to our good relationship with Professor Amaducci, we are entering in this field of algorithm, we are entering in this field of data mining, we are entering in this field of precision farming, and I hope that we will come through in the next couple of years. Okay.
Noi, grazie agli strumenti di cui disponiamo, tra cui i nostri droni, e grazie alla collaborazione con l'Università, col professor Amaducci, puntiamo al data mining, puntiamo all'agricoltura di precisione e spero che questo sarà il nostro futuro.
Nevertheless, globally, agrovoltaico technology allows to produce more for less costs, and this is important for the farmer.
E in generale l'agrovoltaico permette di produrre di più con meno costi e questa è la cosa importante per l'agricoltore.
Grazie.
Grazie Ronald, thank you very much. A me tocca la chiusura, vi chiedo ancora.
Now it's my turn to say some final words. I will try to be brief.
Può essere un po' così, devo farvi dei
Our
numeri.
subject is quite complex. I will try to be brief in giving you the figures.
Allora, cominciamo con qualche informazione.
Let's start with some information. At the end of 2017 in Colorado, a bid for energy with a PPA contract, which is a contract where energy utilities sign a contract to rent some land and produce energy for 20 years at a price set by the bid, which in Italy started just this year with a base of the bid of 11 cents. And then when this bid will be closed, this energy will be sold to the consumers. This bid in Colorado had really low prices. We're talking about $21 per megawatt. With accumulators, which means that the energy would be released in a controlled way on the grid. That means it's 2 cents of dollar per kilowatt. Photovoltaics without accumulators is 3 cents. And for photovoltaics without accumulator, it will be 2.29 cents. Coal, it's about 8.7 cents, and nuclear 5.6 cents. Some other figures given by the Fraunhofer Institute, which is an accredited institute and publishes figures on the energy market. For the next year, solar power will be sold between 3.71 cents to 11.54. And here you can see the price for wind, for lignite, for black coal, for combined turbine, and for gas turbines. And lastly, for nuclear energy, in France there was a bid for a nuclear power plant which sells energy to the UK with a price of 12 cents per kilowatt. What am I saying with this? today renewable energy is cheaper than conventional than energy from conventional sources. Let's now go back to agrivoltaics. Agrivoltaics produces electric energy and here, so you have shadowing, you have agricultural production, and you have energy production. This is a virtuous cycle, and now we understand that photovoltaics, which was a problem for agriculture in the beginning, now is adding value to agriculture. This is a chart that shows the increase in solar radiation. In the 80s, you can see that solar radiation decreased on the Earth, while in 2000, and from that moment on, it started to increase regularly every 10 years. So that means that today we have 30% more solar radiation than in the 80s. That means that now we have more visibility. For example, from here we can see the Alps, and that wasn't a thing in the past. I remember that in my childhood I couldn't see the mountains so frequently. We have more energy production. We have more energy production from solar power. And then we also find out that more solar radiation gives a better mood to people. The negative effects, of course, are temperature increase, water shortages, and more energy consumption. We can all see that the climate problems we're having, it's also an effect of having more solar radiation on the ground. These are researches that were published by Dr. Mogeri and published his research on a scientific journal. Now let's go back to the figures of agrivoltaics. Here we are starting from hypotheses because we haven't still verified our data, but as you can see, our hypotheses are based on scientific studies. We know that shadowing can increase agricultural production. It has a positive effect. Shadowing, for example, helps growing matcha tea in Japan. The bush of the matcha tea plant it actually increases the production up to 50% if it is grown under the shadows. Of course, the shadows must be managed in the right way, and that's why our Japanese colleagues are now building such plants. Also, blackberry on an hectare of land, blackberry can yield about 900,000 kilograms. So if we use shadowing to produce blackberries, you can have 81,000 euros per year. While if we use shadowing on a blackberry field, you can increase the production by 5% at least. So that means that you earn 85,000 euros. You have 4,000 euros more. Now it doesn't look like much, but it's 25% more of profit. We know that in agriculture profits are not so high, so it's really important to increase them. So if you have an agrivoltaic plant on your blackberry field, you will also produce energy. Let's say that you sell 70% of your energy and that you will self-consume 30%. Then we calculate that you will also have a profit of 51,000 euros. So your profit will now be 136 euros, 1,000 euros.
Per cui la sintesi è questa.
So in short, that means that
Per lo mirtillo
if I produce just blackberry, I will have 81,000 euros. If I produce just electric energy, I will have 53,000 euros. If I produce both, I will have slightly less energy, but I will have both source of profits.
entrambe, diciamo, i prodotti,
That means that I can have two products
sia agricolo
and at the same time increase the production of both energy and crops.
per cui come possiamo investire
So how can we invest in this kind of system? We have three ways. The first is that the farmer
sottoproduce
invests his own money
agricola e sopra produce energia elettrica.
and he will
Mira lui il target
produce more energy than crops to find the right balance.
di inclinare meno i pannelli e dare più luce alle piante.
He will find the right balance for shadowing and energy production thanks to an algorithm. Or then you have the second way, which is an investment from an electric utility that will sign an agreement on how he will manage the shadowing on the farmer's land. So that means that the utility can agree to produce less energy to favor crop production. This is a contract we have called PPA+. That means that you don't sell just energy, but you also help crop production with shadowing. Then you have a joint venture where the farmer and the utility energy both make an investment and they will have common interests and they will find the right balance for them.
Conclusioni.
So in conclusion,
Abbiamo detto tutto stamattina quello che andava detto
we've already said this morning
sul futuro della
what had to be said on agrivoltaics. We talked about the important challenges that lay ahead for climate change, for the increase of the Earth population. We now know that we're 4 billions in 1975. We are now 7 billions and we will be 9.7 billions in 2015 and 50. The crucial problems in the future will be food, water and energy. And also you want to increase the living standards of population throughout the world because now we know that the gap between the poor and the rich is way too wide, and what are we trying to do is to diminish this gap between the malnourished and the other people. So in 30 years I hope that we will have a narrower gap between those two layers of population, and that means we will need more food, more water and more energy. And agrivoltaics can satisfy all these needs. That said, we still have a lot of work to do. I'm really happy to have carried out this conference here in a Faculty of Agricultural Sciences together with the scientists, the engineers and the farmers. And also I want to thank the farmers for believing in us, and we, electric utility, will support this process. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions? The figures you showed on blackberries
Si basa per produzione a ettaro o 10 ettari?
Ettaro per anno.
This is production on 1 hectare per year.
Sia per la parte agricola che per la parte
I didn't understand if it's production or the profit.
Per il fotovoltaico, se nella cifra che lei ha considerato sono già
I also didn't understand if in the figures relating to photovoltaics you have already calculated the amortization plans. I'll try to explain it briefly.
La parte produzione elettrica si basa su questo presupposto.
Electric production
Posso costruire 400
is
kW di impianto agrovoltaico.
based on the cost to install 400 of kilowatt on 1 hectare.
Più basso produrrò in un anno 600.000 kW.
So in 1 year I will produce 600,000 kilowatt. We calculated that I would self-consume 1/3 and sell on the market 2/3. With this ratio, you have a return of investment of about 15%. It means that you can pay off your investment in about 7 years. If we switch this ratio, for example, let's say that you have an electric tractor and you need more energy. So instead of selling your energy to the free market, you self-consume it. And let's say you consume 70% of it. The investment will be paid back in 4 years. So the payoff rate is about 25%. Let's say that you self-consume 100% of your energy, you will pay it off even quicker. And then after paying it off for 5 years, you will have free energy. Are there any other questions? No? So now we will have lunch, and then we have shuttles so that we can go visit the plant in Castelvetro Piacentino, which is the plant where Mr. Zagrandi is cultivating peas, and right now is producing energy, and we're cultivating peas, so you will be able to visit this plant, and we will explain the functioning. So if you wish to use the shuttles, or you can follow us on your own car. Thank you.